Summer of 1945. The train crosses the desert of New Mexico heading east. Heat ripples over the rails like a mirage, and the open windows let in fine dust, the smell of iron and rotting vegetation. In one of the third-class cars, a young woman travels alone. Dark hair, carefully pinned up. A simple dress, white gloves, a discreet smile that draws no one's attention. On her lap rests a box of Kleenex. The car vibrates with the mechanical rhythm of the wheels. Outside, the sun crushes the horizon. Inside, the woman looks out the window with the serenity of someone who seems to be in no hurry. From time to time, she takes out a handkerchief and wipes her brow. No one notices that beneath the thin cardboard of that box lies the most powerful secret of the 20th century. Inside, between folds of paper and a false cardboard base, there are documents bearing top security seals from the Manhattan Project. Diagrams of the plutonium core, implosion formulas, pressure and detonation calculations. Pages written with the precision of science and the weight of an entire war. Lona Cohen does not fully understand the equations, but she knows what she's carrying. She knows that what she guards there can change the fate of the world. The air in the car is heavy. A few soldiers doze in wrinkled uniforms. A mother cradles her child wrapped in blankets. No one looks at the woman in the seat by the window. A housewife, they would think, traveling to visit relatives, invisible by nature, harmless, perfect. At every station, her heart beats faster. A guard climbs aboard, checks the aisles, asks random questions. She smiles politely, answers calmly. "Are you traveling alone, ma'am?" "Yes, I'm going to see my sister," she says, holding the box with a steady hand. The guard nods, glances at her face for a moment, and moves on. The train starts again. Lona exhales slowly. The clatter of the wheels resumes its hypnotic cadence. She thinks of Morris, her husband, waiting for her in New York. She thinks of the men working in the desert, unaware that their secrets are already traveling along these rails. She does not feel proud or guilty, only focused. In her mind, she reviews the instructions. Speak to no one, keep her composure, deliver the box at the designated station. If the train stops, do not run. If questioned, cry. If followed, smile. Forget everything else. The landscape flashes by. Distant mountains, parched fields, power towers. With every minute the train advances, the plans for the atomic bomb move farther from the desert and closer to the Atlantic. Lona does not look back. The war will end soon, but she is not traveling for peace. She travels for balance. As the train moves into the afternoon, the sun sinks over the desert, staining the sky a thick, almost metallic red. The car fills with that burning reflection. For a moment, the Kleenex box glows as if fire were inside it. Lona covers it with her coat, closes her eyes, and lets the train run its course. No one in that car knows the world has just changed hands, that the bomb that has not yet exploded already has two owners, and that the woman who carries embroidered flowers on her purse is transporting the deadliest power ever created. They laughed at the housewife until she changed the world's nuclear balance. August of 1945. The Second World War comes to an end. The cities of Europe are gray and silent ruins, those of Asia, dust and smoke. Out of the wreckage of the old order, two powers emerge. One, the United States, intact and wealthy. The other, the Soviet Union, exhausted but victorious. Between them, only distrust remains. On the 6th of August, an unimaginable light falls on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another on Nagasaki. The sky opens in fire, and the world understands that war has changed forever. In the Kremlin, the marshals study the reports in disbelief. Photographs of evaporated cities arrive at Joseph Stalin's desk. No one says a word. The silence weighs more than Germany's defeat. News spreads through the granite walls of Soviet power. The Americans possess a weapon no nation can match. Balance is dead. Fear, however, has just been born. A few hours later, Stalin summons his closest circle. Among them is Lavrenti Beria, head of the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. Stalin does not raise his voice. He doesn't need to. "Bring us the bomb," he says, "before they use it against us." The words are an order and a sentence. Beria nods and summons his men. Within days, an operation begins that does not appear in the history books, the hunt for the atomic secret. Not by conquest, but by imitation. If the United States had achieved the impossible, the Soviet Union had to achieve it too, at any cost. But the Soviet Union does not have the luxury of time. It cannot build from scratch. It needs eyes inside the enemy. The NKVD creates a special division dedicated to obtaining scientific and military information. Its code name, Department S. Its task, penetrate the laboratories, universities, and companies linked to the mysterious Manhattan Project, about which only rumors are known. In Washington, the project's physicists are still celebrating the technical success of the first detonation at Alamogordo. They believe they are working to secure peace. They do not know that their own work has already begun to leak, line by line, through an invisible network that crosses oceans. In Moscow, a group of agents listens to the initial orders. They are few, discreet, without uniforms or medals. They will not use weapons nor command armies. Their battlefield will be silence. Their objective, the plans for the most powerful weapon ever created by human beings. A war is born without fronts, without trenches, and without generals. A war waged in envelopes, briefcases, and codes. A war where victories leave no rubble, only sealed files. In Beria's office, a world map hangs on the wall. On it, a single point of light marks the American Southwest, the heart of the American secret. The official leans over the map and murmurs, "That is where the fire is born, and that is where we will go to find it." Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, in a modest apartment in the Bronx, a woman makes coffee. She does not know it yet, but soon she will become part of that invisible war, a war that will never be officially declared, but that will decide the fate of the planet. New York, 1941. The war has not yet reached American soil, but the country pulses with anxiety. Factories work at full capacity, newspapers speak of Europe in ruins, and Roosevelt's speeches sound on every radio. In the Bronx, in a modest dark brick building, a married couple leads an uneventful life. They are the Cohens, Morris and Lona. Lona, the daughter of Polish immigrants, was born into a working-class family. From a young age, she learned to work, to move among numbers and invoices, to survive without complaint. She is 30 years old and has a quiet, practical intelligence. She works in an accounting office, reviewing the books of small neighborhood businesses. Her desk is full of papers and colored pencils, her purse of receipts and scribbled notes. Every morning she rides the subway, reads the newspaper, and returns home with the same discretion with which she lives. Morris, her husband, is the opposite, restless, idealistic, a mix of veteran and dreamer. He had fought in the Spanish Civil War alongside the international brigades, convinced that fighting fascism in Europe was a just cause. He returned defeated, his body marked by shrapnel and his soul by disappointment. The world, to him, was a chessboard where power always played the wrong pieces. Their apartment is small but full of life. The walls are covered with history books, political pamphlets, newspaper clippings, and an old typewriter. In the kitchen, a framed portrait of the International Brigades hangs beside the calendar. Evenings pass with the radio on and the smell of stale coffee filling the air. They are not banner-waving revolutionaries. They do not attend demonstrations. They do not wave flags. They are quiet believers, faithful to an idea more than to an organization. For them, communism is not a slogan. It is an answer to hunger, to unemployment, to the arrogance of the powerful. Morris sums it up in one sentence: the system is broken and someone has to fix it. In the neighborhood, the Cohens go unnoticed. Sometimes they host small political discussions with friends from the party, but nothing that draws attention. They talk about the war, the price of bread, racism, and the unions. Their neighbors see them as a cultured, reserved couple with more books than furniture. Yet beneath that simple routine, something sets them apart. They have a patience that seems calculated, a calm bordering on coldness. They do not argue. They do not contradict each other. They do not improvise. They live with a silent discipline, as if they were waiting for something they cannot name. One winter night, as snow covers the streets of the Bronx, Lona switches off the radio after Roosevelt's speech. In the apartment's darkness, Morris lights a cigarette and murmurs, "They say we fight for freedom." Lona looks at him, tired. "And you don't believe in that?" He smiles bitterly. "I believe in freedom, just not in the one who doles it out." She does not answer. She stands, straightens some papers, and both remain silent. In that quiet, there is more than routine. There is the sense of being on the cusp of change, that the outside world will soon knock at their door. The war advances, countries divide, secrets become currency. In New York, foreign spies begin to move as naturally as merchants or diplomats, and among them, without knowing it yet, are the Cohens. They live surrounded by books, pamphlets, and shared silences. They are neither heroes nor villains, only believers seeking justice in a collapsing world. But history, silently, is already watching them. In the spring of 1942, when the United States has just officially entered the war, the Cohens keep their routine in the Bronx. They work, read the papers, comment on the Red Army's victories with a mix of relief and admiration. Outside, the country prepares for sacrifice. War bonds, patriotic posters, factories full of workers. Inside their apartment, faith in communism remains intact, but it no longer has direction. One afternoon, a party acquaintance invites them to a private meeting at a downtown cafe. "It's someone who might interest you," he says. They accept without thinking too much. There, amid cigarette smoke and the clatter of streetcars, they meet Jacob Golos. He's a man of about 50, with a friendly face and tired eyes. He speaks in a calm voice without a marked accent. He dresses well, without ostentation. Lona later remembers him as someone who did not seem dangerous, yet conveyed a quiet authority. Golos does not need to convince them of anything. He only asks questions. He asks about the war, about the country's injustices, about the fear they feel watching fascism grow. He listens more than he speaks. After a while, his tone changes. He tells them that there are people around the world working to keep any single nation from controlling the future. That justice is not won with speeches, but with balance. The United States is fighting Hitler, he says, but when the war ends, who will stop the United States? Morris looks at him in silence. Lona crosses her arms. She feels curiosity, not danger. Golos does not mention the NKVD or Soviet communism. He speaks of cooperation, of shared information, of global responsibility. The world needs balance, he repeats. If a single power controls science, the rest will kneel. We don't want to betray our citoyen country, Lona says firmly. Golos barely smiles. You won't. You'll help make sure no country destroys the other. The sentence hangs between them. It does not sound like a proposal for espionage, but like a moral mission. Golos stands, pays the bill, and bids farewell with a handshake. If you decide to help, I'll know how to find you. For days, the subject does not come up again, but the silence between Lona and Morris grows denser. He reads newspaper headlines, battles, advances, bombs, and lets slip a phrase. What if he's right? She does not answer, but that night she takes longer than usual to turn off the light. Weeks later, an envelope with no return address arrives in their mailbox. Inside, there's an address, a time, and a false pair of names. Peter and Helen. They do not need to discuss it. They know the decision has already been made. That night, the Cohens cross an invisible line, not for money nor for ambition, but for faith. To them, the world is not divided between patriots and traitors, but between those who act and those who watch. And although they do not know it yet, their faith, sincere, quiet, dangerous, will carry them farther than they ever imagined. The Cohens' apartment changed little by little. The book stayed in place, the framed photos remained on the walls, and the kettle still whistled every afternoon at the same hour. But beneath that domestic appearance, unsealed envelopes began to arrive, messages in invisible ink, objects that seemed trivial and yet weighed more than any weapon. The NKVD assigned them an instructor. They never learned his real name. Lona knew him only as Victor, a thin man in a gray suit with a European accent hard to place. He was methodical and cold. He taught them that discretion was not hiding, but not attracting attention. "The best spy," he said, "is the one no one remembers having seen." Training did not take place in secret bases, but in the most ordinary places: cafes, libraries, parks. There, Lona learned to pass envelopes from hand to hand without anyone noticing the gesture, to change direction 3 times before stopping, to use shop windows to watch without being watched. Every movement had a purpose, every step an alternative story. She also learned the art of patience. Messages were encoded on microfilm, rolled inside pencils, or hidden in a coat's seams. Texts were written with ink that appeared only with heat, and contacts were made in places where the noise of the crowd erased words. Names were replaced by codes. Lona Cohen ceased to be Lona and became Leslie, another shadow in the inventory of Soviet espionage. Her appearance became her best camouflage. She did not need disguises or exotic names. Her friendly smile, her New York accent, her proper hairstyle were enough. She could move among housewives, shop clerks, and office workers without arousing suspicion. Men underestimated her by instinct. Women ignored her by habit. That invisibility became her greatest advantage. Meanwhile, Morris worked among labor and union circles, locating communist sympathizers, workers in arms factories, couriers willing to carry small packages without asking questions. It was his way of building a network that, little by little, stretched from New York to Los Alamos. At night, when they drew the curtains, they practiced security protocols. Morris dictated code names. Lona memorized them without writing. They reviewed schedules, coincidences, signals. If a message had to be delivered, she would do it. Her calm and ordinary face were the operation's insurance. At local Communist Party meetings, Lona still attended as always. She baked cookies for the gatherings, smiled at neighbors, listened to the idealistic speeches of young militants who dreamed of a fairer world. No one imagined that the woman who took note of dues or neighborhood volunteers also carried, stitched into her dress lining, a microfilm listing American scientists linked to the most secret project in the country. Over time, Lona began to understand that espionage was not a matter of constant danger, but of perfect routine. Her job was not to stand out, not to be remembered, not to leave traces. It was, essentially, learning to disappear. Sometimes, when she was alone, she thought about what she was doing. She did not see it as treason, but as balance. She believed that if both sides had the same information, neither would dare use it. In her mind, espionage was an act of peace disguised as a crime. Thus, the woman whom neighbors knew as a kind bookkeeper became a piece in an invisible network. No one around her ever knew. No one suspected that the smile she offered while delivering a tray of cookies also concealed a cipher key from Moscow. By late 1944 and in the first half of 1945, the desert of New Mexico stopped being an anonymous landscape to become the epicenter of a secret machine: Los Alamos. There, under the codename Manhattan Project, physicists, engineers, and technicians worked against the clock to build something without precedent in human history. Cabins and isolated laboratories smoked with ideas, equations, and experiments until, on the 16th of July, 1945, a test at Alamogordo showed the world what had previously existed only in formulas. The energy contained in a nucleus could be released in an instant, capable of erasing cities. From Moscow, news arrived fragmented and late. Soviet spies could not see the laboratories, they could only suspect. But NKVD intelligence had assembled an overseas network that gathered loose pieces, rumors, partial copies, traces of conversations. Among the names that began to form a secret jigsaw were Klaus Fuchs, the physicist who worked on the project and leaked calculations; Theodore Hall, a young Los Alamos talent with convictions of his own; and David Greenglass, a worker at the complex who, by trade and proximity, could obtain blueprints and descriptions of mechanisms. Each contribution was a piece, sometimes a paragraph on a page, sometimes a formula, that, joined to others, would reconstruct the core of the weapon. The challenge was not only obtaining the information, but moving it without leaving a trace. In an era when mail was inspected and communications, if not spied upon, could be intercepted, secrecy's logistics demanded cunning. Documents had to be reduced to their minimum representation, microfilms rolled in pencil barrels, texts written with inks revealed by heat, photographic plans disguised inside book covers. And more importantly, they needed hands no one would look at with suspicion. That was what the Cohens were for. Lona did not understand equations or the language of accelerators and firing circuits. She did not need to. Her task was practical and lethally simple: receive, hide, and deliver. On some table at Los Alamos, someone folded diagrams into exact creases, stamped them with a security seal that was more fear than mark, and sent them in opaque envelopes toward the east. In a city along the way, a messenger handed them to a contact who, without ceremony, placed them in the hands of a woman with white gloves and a Kleenex box. That chain depended on constancy and habit. Morris wove the network in the visible world: unions, workshops, transport routes where a package without questions could change hands without arousing suspicion. Lona, for her part, made routine her shield. She bought train tickets, sewed linings into garments, folded papers with the calm with which a housewife folds sheets. In the kitchen, amid dishes and radio chatter, she practiced breathing that neutralized any tremor while passing through a station full of soldiers. Her movements were repeated until they became memory. Enter, sit, feign sleep, hold the box, smile when the guard's light passed. The moral gravity of the act weighed as well. On one occasion, before a trip, Morris looked at her and said softly, "If they arrest us and ask, we'll say we were foolish, not traitors." She replied without hesitation, "We are not foolish. We are necessary." Sometimes, on nights when everything seemed quiet, Lona wondered whether what she carried would hasten peace or a new war. She never had certainty, only the conviction that information, distributed symmetrically, could prevent the monopoly of destruction. It was not a technical thought, it was a moral logic, simple and brutal. While physicists at Los Alamos argued about detonation times, densities, and delays, and while engineers in Moscow deciphered what arrived, the final piece of the puzzle traveled by rail and by human hand. Every plan that crossed the country inside a box of tissues drew closer to rooms where new eyes would read it, new calculators would transform it, and secret factories would turn it into tests. Information had ceased to be mere knowledge. It had become strategic, capital. The risk was not only prison. It was the weight of knowing that a mistake could change the lives of millions. That is why the operation worked with a mix of discipline and banality. The Cohens acted like any neighbor until banality ended at a station and discipline took the form of a box on a lap. Lona did not know how an implosion system worked, but she understood that her decision to keep silent and move that cargo calmly could mean the difference between a world with balance or none. In those critical weeks of 1944-1945, while scientists and generals mapped a new era, an invisible network made of trust and routine began turning rumors into knowledge. When the plans finally reached Soviet hands and Moscow's engineers examined them with furrowed brows, they hardly imagined who had carried those papers from one end of the continent to the other, a woman with white gloves sitting by a window, watching the desert recede. July of 1945. The air still hums with the electricity of a war nearing its end. In the laboratories of Los Alamos, the physicists celebrate the imminence of an experiment they believe decisive. At the same time, in the shadows of Albuquerque, another kind of preparation is underway. Lona Cohen arrives on a passenger train with a cheap ticket and a simple story: visiting family. No one awaits her on the platform. No one follows her. She checks into a small hotel near the station. The heat is stifling. Curtains cling to the glass and dust covers everything. The next morning, she receives a note slipped under the door. Room 212, at 5. No signature. When she goes up, the room smells of tobacco and freshly printed paper. Inside, there's a young, thin, nervous man. He does not give his name. He takes from his briefcase a sealed package tied with tape and without labels. He holds it with both hands, as if he fears it might come apart. If they stop you, don't talk. Lona nods. She asks nothing. The man hands her the package, and she puts it away with the same naturalness with which a woman puts away a book. She places it on the table, takes a handkerchief from her purse, and begins to empty a cardboard box, the one she used during the trip. Docile, practical, without theatrics, she slides the papers inside. She fits the lid carefully, smooths the edges, and sets the box in her bag. The gesture takes seconds, but the weight of the world has just changed place. She walks to the station with a normal pace. She buys a ticket for the train to Chicago and then to New York. While she waits, she fans herself with her hat and watches the crowd. Soldiers with suitcases, mothers with children, office workers heading home. The war is not over yet, but the city seems eager to forget it. When she boards the car, the air smells of coal and metal. She sits by the window, sets her bag on her knees, and looks out. Inside it, the Kleenex box holds the plans for the atomic bomb's implosion mechanism, the dimensions of the plutonium core, the calculations of shock waves, the detonation timings. Elsewhere in the country, the scientists who designed them still argue over the precision of those figures. Lona understands none of them, but she understands the risk of carrying them. Midway through the journey, the train stops. A group of men in military uniforms enters. They check papers, suitcases, passports. Two walk down the aisle with flashlights. One stops in front of Lona. "Are you traveling alone, ma'am?" She looks up, smiles calmly. "Yes, I'm going to visit my sister in New York." The agent studies her for a second longer, nods, and continues. Lona's heart beats fast, but her face does not show it. The train starts up again. Outside, the desert spreads beneath a copper sky. The metallic sound of the wheels accompanies her like a metronome. Every kilometer she travels takes her farther from danger and closer to the end of her task. In a compartment at the back, two soldiers laugh. A vendor offers coffee. A child points to the distant mountains. Normality covers everything. No one looks at the woman holding a box of tissues on her lap. No one imagines that inside that thin cardboard rests the map of destruction. When the train crosses the Mississippi, night falls. Lona looks out the window. Her reflection blends with the darkness of the landscape. She thinks of Morris, of Golos's words, of the balance they spoke of. In that moment, she understands that true power is not in the one who builds the bomb, but in the one who decides who knows it. The train heads toward dawn. Around her, passengers sleep. She does not. She keeps her hands on the bag as if guarding something fragile. No one stops her. No one remembers her. And the century's most powerful secret crosses America without an escort. The following weeks were a blur of routes and relays. The package passed from hand to hand, crossed ports and consular offices, traveled inside diplomatic pouches and unmarked envelopes. Each intermediary knew only one part of the way. When it finally reached Moscow, it was a sheaf of papers that smelled of American dust and fresh ink. In an anonymous building on the capital's outskirts, the documents were placed on a wooden table. Two guards shut the door, and a small group of engineers sat down. Among them, hair tousled and an unlit cigarette between his fingers, was Igor Kurchatov, the physicist in charge of the Soviet nuclear program. The papers were arranged with surgical precision, diagrams of internal explosion, compression equations, schematics of the plutonium core, notes on detonator synchronization, and yield calculations. They were not fragments, they were the complete map of the bomb's heart. Kurchatov reviewed them in silence, page by page. At first he thought they were forgeries, or incomplete data, but as he continued, he recognized familiar patterns, coherent formulas, unmistakable logic. "Это всё реально," he murmured softly. "This is real." That night, the engineer wrote an urgent report. In his summary, he wrote a single sentence: "The documents are authentic. They will reduce the device's development by years." The file reached the hands of Lavrenti Beria, Chief of State Security, a man who did not understand physics, but did understand power. Beria did not need to read the details. He only looked at the English classification marks and grasped their meaning. He picked up the direct phone to the Kremlin. "Comrade Stalin, we have the key." The words traveled the country like a secret echo. Experiments accelerated, resources multiplied, and Soviet scientists, now guided by American plans, worked day and night in Artemis 16, the most secret laboratory in the Soviet Union. Over the following 4 years, while the United States celebrated its nuclear monopoly and the rest of the world dozed under its shadow, a mirror rose in the Urals. In August of 1949, the sky over Kazakhstan lit with a white light. The earth trembled. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb. Its internal code name was First Lightning. In Washington, the news fell like thunder. No one understood how the Soviets had advanced so fast. Intelligence agencies spoke of espionage but could not prove it. Newspaper headlines spoke of the end of the monopoly, of a new world balance. In the Kremlin, Stalin merely nodded. He had kept his promise. The enemy could no longer threaten without expecting an answer. No one outside the highest circles ever knew how the secret had been broken. In official reports, informants' names were erased. The papers that passed through Lona Cohen's hands were archived, sealed, and kept under 7 locks. In the laboratories, Soviet scientists wrote dedications in the margins of their reports to our anonymous comrades who made this achievement possible. But her name was on no list. In books, speeches, and parades, the triumph was credited to Soviet science, the genius of the physicists, the power of the state. No one mentioned the woman who had crossed the country with a box of tissues on her knees. The world's balance had changed, and the name of Lona Cohen appeared in no report. Balance never lasts long. In 1950, just months after the Soviets detonated their first nuclear bomb, the FBI began to connect pieces that until then had seemed unrelated. Encrypted communications intercepted by the Venona program, duplicated addresses, inexplicable payments. Behind every stroke, a name. Behind every name, a link. On the 17th of July, New York newspapers opened with headlines that shook the country. Couple accused of atomic espionage. They were the Rosenbergs, Julius and Ethel, accused of delivering information about the Manhattan Project to the Soviet Union. Their arrest was the beginning of a hunt. Fear spread like a fever. Espionage became a cursed word. In their small Bronx apartment, Lona and Morris Cohen read the news in silence. They did not need to speak. They knew the circle was closing. The Rosenbergs had been part of the same network, the same contacts, the same invisible hands. That night, the telephone rang once, then fell silent. It was the agreed signal. The escape plan activated immediately. There was no drama, only efficiency. Documents were burned in the bathtub, transmitters dismantled piece by piece, notebooks destroyed and their remains thrown out the window into the snow falling in the street. Lona checked the apartment one last time. She touched the empty frames, the books, the dead radio. In a small suitcase, she packed a few photographs, her parents, her wedding, a view of Coney Island. She knew she would never see them again. They changed clothes. She dyed her hair, he trimmed his mustache. In the mirror, 2 strangers. They left at dawn, blending with the workers heading to the subway. They took a train south. No conversation, no out-of-place gesture. Only the metallic noise of the wheels marking the distance between them and the country they were leaving behind. The border with Mexico met them in heat and dust. They presented themselves as tourists, Peter and Helen Kroger, dealers in rare books. The false passports bore authentic stamps, the product of a network as old as theirs. The customs officer barely looked at them. He stamped the documents and waved them through with a tired smile. When the train crossed the bridge over the Rio Grande, Lona took a deep breath for the first time in days. She looked out the window and saw the water's reflection running under the planks. The feeling was strange, relief and loss at once. Behind them lay her name, her accent, her country. In Mexico, they settled in a modest apartment in the Roma neighborhood. They changed money for pesos, learned basic phrases in Spanish, disappeared. To the FBI, the Cohens had vanished from the map. In official reports, their trail ended in New York, possibly outside the country. No one knew that across the border, they continued serving the same master. At night, while they listened to the distant sounds of the city, music, voices, engines, Morris typed on a borrowed machine, and Lona filed each page in a nameless folder. They lived in the stillness of anonymity, in danger disguised as routine. The world they had helped balance kept turning. But for them, the axis had broken. They were no longer the Cohens. They were shadows with new faces and a past that could not be spoken aloud. Lona looked at the streets from the balcony, the hot air, the street vendors, life carrying on. Sometimes she thought of the hands that had touched the Kleenex box and how something so small had changed the course of history. Now, in another country and with another name, she had only silence left. Silence and the certainty that she could never again be who she had been. Mexico City, 1951. The sun beats down on zinc roofs and colonial facades. Traffic noise rises from the avenues and mixes with the vendors' calls. In the crowd, a couple walks hand in hand, discreet, invisible. They are Peter and Helen Kroger, British dealers in old books. No one suspects that beneath those false names live Morris and Lona Cohen, the same people the FBI quietly seeks north of the border. Their apartment is in the Roman neighborhood, on a tree-lined street where jacarandas drop violet blossoms on parked cars. The facade is simple, nothing to distinguish it. Inside, life divides into two rhythms, that of normality and that of vigilance. In the morning, Helen, Lona, goes to the market, chats with neighbors, greets the doorkeeper. In the afternoon, Peter reviews papers on an improvised table or tends to supposed clients looking for rare books. None of those books is actually for sale. Beneath the covers are hollow compartments, rolls of film, coded messages on photographic paper. They work for Moscow, but not for heroism or reward. They are a gear in a mechanism. Their task is to transmit information, to act as a bridge between contacts in America and Europe, to keep alive a network that time and fear have made brittle. Messages travel in double bottoms, in seemingly innocent envelopes. Reports from agents in the Western Bloc cross the Atlantic in postal packages bearing labels of fictitious publishers. Everything that passes through their hands is secret, and everything they touch must vanish afterward. At first glance, they seem dull. They talk to neighbors about the weather, sometimes attend mass, drink coffee on the terrace at Sanborn's on Insurgents. They smile when someone asks about their country. England, Lona answers with an invented accent. People nod, convinced. No one imagines that every word has been rehearsed. At night, the apartment transforms. Curtains close, fans are switched off, and on the dining table appear the tools of the other trade: a white lamp, a shortwave transmitter, sheets with numeric keys. Lona adjusts the dials while Morris decodes messages. The two work in silence, with the precision of those who know a mistake could cost them their lives. Sometimes, when they finish, they sit by the open window. The city still lives outside, oblivious to them. Cars pass, bars close, the air smells of gasoline and night. In those moments, the distance between what they were and what they are seems wider than the ocean separating them from their country. One night, while a waltz plays on a local station, Morris breaks the silence. "Do you regret it?" he asks without looking at her. Lona snubs out the cigarette, lets the ash fall into an empty glass. "Only if one day they forget why we did it." He nods slowly. Neither of them speaks again. They know memory is also a form of loyalty. Time in Mexico dissolves into a taut calm. Every dawn brings the relief of remaining free and the fear of being discovered. Letters from Moscow arrive sporadically, with vague orders and chilly congratulations. They always repeat the same phrase: maintain discretion. Balance depends on silence. And silence is what the Cohens, now the Krogers, know how to maintain to perfection. At the beginning of the 1960s, the wind of the Cold War blew hard over Europe. The Cuban Revolution had changed the board, and the powers now played with subtler, quieter strategies. In that context, Moscow decided that its most experienced agents should be closer to the front. The KGB contacted the Cohens, the Krogers according to their papers, and gave them new orders: return to the continent under a new identity. The transfer was calculated down to the detail. New British passports issued with authentic documents obtained by the Soviet network in London. New names: Peter and Helen Kroger, citizens of the United Kingdom, booksellers specializing in rare editions. The shipments left from Mexico, crossed the Atlantic, and weeks later, the Cohens landed in Warsaw. There, Cold, damp, and an unknown language were their new frontier. On a quiet street in the Polish capital, they opened a small second-hand bookshop. In the window, old editions of Dickens, navigation manuals, and antique sea charts. Inside, the smell of old paper mixed with the hum of electrical machines discreetly under the floor. What seemed a humdrum business was, in truth, a covert transmission base. From that dim room, the Cohens became a vital node of Soviet espionage in Europe. They received and transmitted information to London, Moscow, and East Berlin. They used numeric codes, invisible ink, and miniaturized transmitters hidden among the shelves. Their hands moved data on British naval maneuvers, routes of Polaris nuclear submarines, and diplomatic documents obtained by other agents. Routine was their shield. Every morning, Helen opened the shop, cleaned the window, offered tea to the few curious customers who came in. Peter cataloged books with a bookkeeper's precision. Each gesture was rehearsed. Prices, small talk, courteous smiles. No one suspected that behind the back wall, a telescopic antenna unfolded every night toward the sky to send coded signals to Moscow. Their life in Warsaw unfolded in the discipline of the everyday. At night, when the streets emptied and snow covered the cobblestones, Lona, Helen, turned on the work lamp, connected the transmitter, and began dictating reports in an almost mechanical voice. Every message ended the same way. All in order, the operation continues. For nearly a decade, their cover was perfect. Reports arrived punctually. Neighbors knew them as a kind couple, always ready to recommend a book or offer a cup of tea. In a gray Warsaw rebuilt on the war's ruins, their facade of normality was as convincing as it was impenetrable. Sometimes, Lona walked through the old streets downtown. She looked at stone buildings, at shrapnel scars still visible on some facades. She thought of New York, of the Bronx, of the Kleenex box that had changed her life's course. It seemed a distant dream, almost someone else's. She and Morris were no longer the same. They had ceased to be idealists to become disciplined cogs in an invisible machine. Espionage, she then understood, was not about heroes or causes. It was about persisting, about not being discovered, about sustaining a lie until it became indistinguishable from the truth. And for 10 years, no one discovered them. Their cover was so solid that even the KGB from Moscow described it as a model of long-term undercover operation. In internal reports, British agents considered them ghosts. They knew someone was transmitting from Warsaw, but could not identify who. The network the Cohens maintained in Europe ran with cold mathematical precision, until one night, a miscalibrated signal would break the silence. Winter of 1961. On a quiet street in the Ruislip neighborhood, west of London, a red brick building looks as ordinary as any in its row. At number 34 lives a middle-aged couple, the Krogers, British booksellers who run a second-hand shop. No one bothers them, no one watches them, or so they believe. For weeks, a Scotland Yard unit had intercepted a radio signal coming from the neighborhood. It was a coded transmission, brief, repetitive, always emitted at the same hour of the night. Counterintelligence technicians traced the source, a domestic antenna, discreet, barely visible atop a house. The error was minimal, a simple frequency desynchronization, but it was enough. On the 7th of January 1961, before dawn, several unmarked cars surrounded the house. Agents entered quietly, striking the front door with a rifle butt. The metallic sound woke Lona. In seconds, she understood it was all over. There was no time to destroy anything, not even to lie. Police searched the house room by room. In the sitting room, they found books with hollow compartments, false coins, coded maps, and behind a bookcase, a shortwave transmitter connected to a telescopic antenna. In the basement, an encoding machine and papers with number series. The evidence was irrefutable. Lona and Morris were arrested without resistance. The agents handcuffed them carefully. They seemed more curious than hostile. They were not facing violent criminals, but two people too ordinary for the crime ascribed to them. In the police car on the way to the station, Lona looked out the window. It was snowing. The dawn light fell on the pavement, and she thought, without saying it, that it was very much like her first train trip. Again, the cold, the movement, the silence. During interrogation, the British officers kept bureaucratic courtesy. "Who ordered you to do it?" the inspector asked. Lona met his eyes. "No one. We believed in something." The inspector wrote the sentence down. Without comment, it was the most honest answer and at the same time, the most useless. The trial was swift. They were charged with espionage on behalf of the Soviet Union, with transmitting military information and maintaining a clandestine radio station. The British press portrayed them as parlor spies, more intriguing than dangerous. During the trial, Lona remained impassive, listening to the reading of the evidence without changing expression. Morris, by contrast, tried to defend their cause, speaking of balance, of peace, of a divided world. No one wanted to listen. The verdict arrived on the 22nd of March, 1961, 20 years in prison. In the cell, Lona neither cried nor spoke. She adapted to silence like someone returning to a known language. She read, sewed, walked. For her, prison was not punishment, it was the last room of her long clandestinity. They served 8 years. In 1969, when tensions between the powers began to ease, they were included in a diplomatic exchange. Moscow offered a British spy captured on Soviet soil in exchange for the Krogers. The agreement was signed discreetly. No one mentioned them in the newspapers. On the day of the swap, a plane took off from London with 2 tired-looking passengers. Upon landing in Moscow, a KGB official received them with flowers and decorations that gleamed under the gray sky. Morris barely smiled. Lona held the flowers on her lap. No one spoke during the drive to the hotel. They had left behind 25 years of false lives, false countries, false names, and even so, their story remained a secret. The plane landed in Moscow on a gray April morning in 1969. On the tarmac waited a discreet committee, 2 KGB colonels, an official photographer, and a bouquet far too large for the occasion. When Lona and Morris descended the stairway, the wind struck their faces with the same cold they had felt in Warsaw years earlier. Melted snow covered the runway like a sheet of glass. No one applauded, no one spoke. The officials greeted them with handshakes and rehearsed smiles. There was satisfaction, but no enthusiasm. In the Kremlin, they knew that the heroes of the shadows are not celebrated in public. They are thanked in private. The Krogers, the Cohens, returned to their country as confidential legends. In a ceremony without press, they received the Order of Lenin, the Soviet Union's highest decoration. The medal was gold, but the inscription minimal, for exceptional service to the state. There were no details. None were needed. Afterwards, they were assigned an apartment in a residential block for veterans on the city's outskirts. 6th floor, 2 rooms, a view of the forest, a place where silence did not weigh. The years that followed were quiet, almost still. Morris wrote memoirs he never published. Lona arranged balcony flowers and now and then answered letters from old comrades. In the neighborhood, people knew them as a polite couple, always courteous, who spoke little and walked slowly. No one suspected that the 2 elderly shoppers at the state store had spent half a life with false names and borrowed passports. Time wore down certainties. The Soviet Union aged with them. Slogans faded, speeches became routine, and the great cause that had once given them meaning dissolved into bureaucratic reports and unenthusiastic anniversaries. Sometimes, on winter nights, Lona opened an album and looked at faded pictures of the past. A young woman on a train, a cardboard box, a serene gaze. "Do you think it was worth it?" she asked once when the silence grew too long. Morris looked at her without answering. His face, now lined with wrinkles, still held that stubborn calm of those who do not allow themselves to doubt. In 1995, he died in his bed, at 85 years of age. Lona survived him 1 more year. Neighbors found her body seated by the window, hair pinned up, eyes open to the snow. On the table there was a teacup, half empty, and a folder tied with a red ribbon. Few attended her funeral. A handful of former Soviet intelligence colleagues, a Ministry of Defense official, 2 neighbors. The flowers were the same they had received upon returning from exile, large, silent, without perfume. No one mentioned her past. No one recalled the train, the box of tissues, the documents that crossed a continent under her coat. To the Kremlin, Lona and Morris Cohen were symbols of unbreakable loyalty. To them, it was simply the end of a long flight. And as earth fell upon the coffin, the few who still knew their story kept silent. Only one attendee, an elderly KGB man, murmured almost to himself, "A box of Kleenex. Who would have thought?" Half a century had passed since that journey, and the world's most powerful secret still rested invisible in the hands of a woman everyone had mistaken for a housewife. For decades, official archives and history books barely mentioned her name. When they did, they called her the Housewife Spy, a nickname that felt more ironic than honoring. But Lona Cohen's true achievement was not hiding secrets. It was becoming invisible even after changing them all. In a world dominated by generals, scientists, and politicians, she proved that intelligence could have a domestic face, a quiet voice, and steps without echo. The history of the Cold War is full of men who designed weapons, signed treaties, and declared wars without firing a shot. But very few shifted the planet's balance without anyone noticing. Lona did. Not with violence nor with orders, but with precision, patience, and the stubborn faith that information was a form of power that could balance fear. While others built bombs, she transported ideas. Speeches spoke of patriotism, she crossed borders with papers heavier than steel. And while the world divided into victors and vanquished, Lona Cohen walked between both sides carrying a lie that contained a truth, that fragility can also be a weapon. Her name hardly appears in books, but her trace lives on every page of the Cold War. In every accord, in every missile, in every silence that followed the roar of nuclear tests, there is a shadow that accompanies it. Her Kleenex box was not just a hiding place. It was a symbol of the banality with which destiny sometimes disguises itself. The men of power underestimated her. They thought she was a minor courier, a replaceable piece, an accident of history. But she, without raising her voice, without breaking her composure, took that box in her hands, smiled with the calm of one who knows more than she seems, and carried the world's future under her arm. Invisibility was her gift and her condemnation. And although time has erased her from the front pages, her shadow remains in the secret history of the 20th century. The story of an ordinary woman who bore, without witnesses, the weight of the planet's nuclear balance.